Hello and welcome to another edition of the WorkplaceTech Spotlight. My name is Guillermo Corea, Managing Director of SHRM Labs, SHRM's Workplace Innovation Lab. I'm your host for this series where we shine a spotlight on some of the most interesting future of work topics, innovators, and disruptive technologies. Before we get going with today's program, just a little housekeeping and general announcements. So this year, we're further expanding the Better Workplaces Challenge Cup, the leading workplace tech pitch competition, and adding a new track for SHRM members to showcase how the people who know the workplace the best, HR, are innovating, and we know you're out there. The application period for individual SHRM members is now open and will close on February 19th. Please note that the winner of this competition will receive a trip to the SHRM Annual Conference and Exposition in Las Vegas from June 11th through the 14th. As many of you know, this is the largest HR conference in the world. We're also expanding SHRM Tech from India and bringing it to the US for the first time. You may have seen the video that we showed at the very beginning. So we will be hosting the first ever SHRM Tech event at the Grand Hyatt San Francisco, March 7th through the 8th. And SHRM Tech is the premier HR tech event for the HR decision maker. Registrations are open now, and there's a limited number of spots that are available, so hope you're going to be able to join us. For those of you watching on LinkedIn or other social media platforms, please share this live stream and tag SHRM. You can use the hashtags SHRM Labs and Workplace Tech as well. So today we're going to dive into a timely topic around navigating HR compliance in 2023. As many of you know out there, HR professionals know that workplace laws, they evolve quickly. Every year, there's a new batch of laws at the city, state, and federal level that affects the workplace. For example, Maryland recently passed SB 450. How many of you out there know what SB 450 is? Well, this is a law that potentially makes it easier for employees to prevail on claims that would not have previously risen to the level of legally actionable harassment. Maryland also passed SB 451, which establishes a longer time period to bring civil actions for unlawful employment practices. New York City passed a pay transparency law that applies to remote jobs. It joined others such as California, Colorado, and Washington, who have passed similar laws requiring employers to list salary ranges in all job postings. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Workplace legal and compliant issues are top of mind for any HR department. So joining us to talk about this topic today is Jocelyn King, CEO and founder of VirgilHR. She's a former HR executive who is well-versed in this topic. Jocelyn, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the stage. Before we begin, can you please tell the audience a little bit about you and VirgilHR? And I think it would be great for the audience to hear about your HR executive experience.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Guillermo. As Guillermo mentioned, I've been an HR practitioner. I've actually been an HR practitioner my entire career. Most of it has been spent with high growth technology companies, both public and private. I actually started my career at Target, got a lot of employee relations experience there, and decided to move into tech after that. And I've held some pretty interesting roles. One was a VP of HR for North America for the largest tech company on the London Stock Exchange. Most recent was a VP of HR for a Series C tech startup in the DC area. So very wide range of organizations that I've been with. But one thing that's been fairly common, being high growth as a multi-state employer, has been the challenge that we've had with tracking and complying with employment and labor laws at the federal, state, and local level, especially at the state and local level. And coming from tech, I thought there has to be a way we can automate this process for HR professionals. The HR profession, as you all know, has expanded significantly since COVID. Before, we might have only been responsible for knowing the laws in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. But now that we have so many hybrid and remote workforces, we're responsible for 20 states, and we're expected to be fluent with 20 states. So it's been very difficult to comply. And what we were doing, and I know so many other HR professionals are doing, is we're going on Google and we are Googling maternity leave requirements in California, and you get however many million hits and you go down a rabbit hole for a few hours. Or we're speaking with attorneys, which is very expensive and you don't always get the answers you need right away. You might be subscribing to email law alerts, and those are super helpful because you get all the news on the newest laws that are being released. But the problem here is that this is all very manual. It's very time consuming, and there's a lot of room for error. And personally, one of the experiences that I had was the fear that we might make the wrong decisions simply because we didn't know what to look for. So, today, one of the most terrifying statistics is the fact that 1 in 10 employers every year is being sued by an employee, and employers are spending billions of dollars a year on settlement fees alone. Not to mention the amount of time it takes to actually go through litigation, which is, if anybody's gone through that, you'd know how terribly difficult that is. So, this is nothing new to HR professionals out there. You all know this. HR, really, though, what we've experienced is the fact that technology is failing HR compliance. We don't have the right tools that we need to be efficient and effective and accurate at our jobs. So automation is really key. And what I decided to do was build a company built off of automation technology. So what we do at VirgilHR is we have a knowledge center that at its core has an automated chatbot that provides instant employment and labor law guidance to HR professionals in the moment on whatever task you're working on. So if you are looking up maternity leave requirements for California online, what you do instead is go to our chatbot, submit, I have an employee taking maternity leave in California, and it will start asking diagnostic questions and then tell you in a matter of minutes what federal, state, and local employment and labor laws apply, how they run concurrently with each other, what entitlements an individual has, what responsibilities an employer has. And then something really cool is we take it a step further and then provide very prescriptive guidance, step-by-step suggestions on everything you need to do to be compliant. Filling out these forms, contacting the employee with X amount of time, following up with the state agency, et cetera. So what we're really here to do is to help HR really save time so that they can focus on more strategic areas of the business, help control cost, both legal cost for that regular consultation that you're doing or legal costs for settlement fees. And then the last piece is really ensuring that employees are receiving fair and equitable treatment by ensuring that they're receiving the greatest benefits afforded to them under the applicable laws. So that's really what we're here to do, and hopefully kind of elevate this whole process with technology for HR professionals.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for a thorough intro. And I wanted to make sure that the audience heard about your background and everything, so that, so they understand where you're coming from. So let's get right into it. Every year we've been talking about it. HR professionals need to make sure they stay up to date on all the new workplace laws that happen, that typically go into effect at the beginning of the year. But before we get into that, right? Let's look at what happened last year. What do you think were some of the major legal compliance issues that HR had to deal with in 2022?
Sure. I think one of the big ones is the COVID-19 vaccines and determining whether or not we can make that a requirement in the workplace. The EEOC said that federal anti-discrimination laws it enforces don't prohibit employers from requiring vaccinations, but must consider reasonable accommodations for employees. And that was a directive that we as HR practitioners were really looking for to figure out what type of policies and practices we needed to put in place. And it became extremely difficult as we were determining what type of reasonable accommodations could exist without creating an undue hardship on the business. So that was pretty tough. Another one was actually Roe v. Wade. So employers having to revisit benefits to potentially provide PTO so employees could access reproductive care, and some actually even providing costs for travel expenses to receive reproductive care. So big topic of conversation. And I think that really created a revolution for us to revisit some of the benefits that we're offering to our employees, especially those in some industries that are underrepresented. And the last piece, and you spoke to this a little bit, Guillermo, is pay transparency laws. That's becoming more and more common, similar to the salary history ban that we've seen over the last few years and is continuing to grow. We're starting to see that now with pay transparency laws as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And and now it's so easy for employees to go out there on, they could easily go to Google or Indeed, type in the type of role that they're looking for, and just put in New York City, and then boom, they get an idea, right? And I know that there's, between New York City and Topeka, Kansas, right? It's not the same type of salary, but at least you'll get an idea, right, for what you might, what an employee might ask for. So
Yeah.
are there any notable lawsuits that you can think of that happened in 2022?
Yeah, so one that actually settled in October for 2.2 million is for employees working for a small restaurant chain. And something that was a little entertaining about this settlement is that in addition to paying out 2.2 million for unpaid wages, the settlement also included a personal apology to each employee, which I kind of got a kick out of. That was interesting to see. But these alleged violations included unpaid minimum wage, overtime, meal premiums, etc., and even an allegation that the employer was keeping employee tips. Something really interesting about this, though, is that this involved a small restaurant chain. So there's a chance that ignorance played a role in the alleged violations, but the size of this settlement should be a reminder for employers that ignorance is no excuse. So what I would really recommend HR practitioners do is conduct routine wage and hour audits that should include examination of wage statements like paychecks, and also training management on best practices for wage and hour compliance. The other law, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, the other law that I thought was kind of interesting, especially with all this talk around the DOL and independent contractors, is this 10-year lawsuit that finally settled in December for $4.75 million with the Hub Group. And it was for misclassification. I'd like to point out, too, that, and I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but I just think it's so important to point out, in addition to the 4.75 million, you can imagine how much the attorney's fees were over a 10-year period. So the ever-changing nature of California's independent contractor test played a really big part in this litigation. And it highlights one of the rarely mentioned but very effective ways to prevent this type of lawsuit, which is to stop hiring independent contractors in litigious jurisdictions. But that's obviously not practical for every business to just stop working with independent contractors. So these businesses should really strongly consider auditing existing independent contractor and employee classifications to ensure compliance under the revised tests on a continuing basis, especially in jurisdictions like California.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think that it's just about lawsuits that HR should worry about. They should also be worrying about compliance with the government, right? Because there are some fees out there that they could get hammered with. I know a lot of cases where these small businesses are getting hit with $100,000, $200,000 worth of penalties, and for a small business, that's a lot, right? Cool.
I think another point to note is just the damage that it does to employer brand as well. I think especially in the first kind of case, the small restaurant business, there may have been some ignorance at play, and it's unfortunate when people just don't know what they're supposed to do or not do, and how much trouble it gets them into. But the consequences on employer brand can be pretty significant as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So along those lines, and we kind of alluded to some of them already. What do you think are some of the key issues or things that happen that get employers in trouble?
Well, worker classification is one of them. That's probably one of the most common reasons why an employer is getting sued. Another very, very common reason is wage theft. So withholding or docking of wages, overtime rates, not paying appropriate minimum wages, etc. Retaliation is a big one. So in 2021, the EEOC received over 34,000 retaliation charges of retaliation, which made up about 56% of the charges filed that year, which is pretty significant. And then I don't think that we really talk about this enough, but There's a huge risk on the talent acquisition side for employers. Unlawful pre-employment questions leading to discrimination is another key reason why employers will get in trouble.
Fantastic. So let's get into 2023, right? What are, we're in January, beginning of the year, right? What are some of the key changes that you think HR professionals need to be aware of that have already happened or that are going to be happening later on in the year?
Sure. So I think one of them is Colorado and Oregon requiring employers and employees to contribute toward family and medical leave insurance funds. That started January 1st. There are some extenuating circumstances as to whether an employer needs to contribute based on the size of the organization. But there are some nuances to these laws, and I would highly encourage people to look them up and learn more. Maine actually amended its paid leave law. It now requires private employers with 11 or more employees to pay out on accrued vacation leave upon separation, regardless of the reason. New York amended its paid family leave law so employees can receive benefits to care for their siblings who have serious health conditions, and that would include not just biological siblings, but adopted step and half siblings as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up what I alluded to earlier, the Department of Labor's efforts to change the independent contractor rule back to the 6th factor of the economic realities test. Under the proposed rule, the ultimate inquiry will be whether, as a matter of economic reality, a worker is either economically dependent on the employer for work or is in business for himself or herself as an independent contractor using the 6th factor of the economics realities test. So more to come there, but that one is super interesting. And they submitted that proposal back in October, I believe. So we'll see what comes of that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's just mind-numbing to think about all the different laws that HR has to keep up with. So what are some of the resources that you can, do you have any resources that you can share with our audience out there as to, that they might find helpful in keeping up with all these laws? Obviously, there's you guys, VirgilHR, but any other ones that you guys can think of or that you can think of?
Sure. Honestly, I mean, one of them that always really helped me was actually SHRM's content. I thought it was really helpful. I thought the email alerts were very helpful. The posts that come out about the different laws that are being released and how that impacts you as an HR professional was super great. I'm also going to include a link to a white paper the audience can download that my team wrote that gives some really great tips and information on compliance in the workplace. And then, yeah, I mean, if you aren't interested in tracking the laws and doing the manual research and paying for lawyers, you should definitely leverage technology that's out there like Virgil and see what type of automation is available to you so that you can be more efficient at work.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Jocelyn. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I know from all the years being here at SHRM how compliance and all the different laws impacts companies and HR departments. So for all of you out there, we hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you'd like more information on VirgilHR, please visit them at VirgilHR.com. Also, we hope that you're going to be joining us at SHRM Tech in March, to learn about a lot of these, innovations and technologies and honestly, to how to drive digital transformation in the workplace, because we believe that HR is the function that is best equipped to be able to do that. So thank you all for tuning in to the SHRM Labs Workplace Tech Spotlight. If you enjoyed this live stream, please share it using hashtags SHRM Labs, Workplace Tech, and SHRM. Visit us at SHRMLabs.com to stay up to date. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend, everyone.